to be sharing it in the association of devotees like your good self. So thank you for being here. Also wanted to apologize for the confusion last week. I think there was some communication gap. And for those of you who came on the bridge and to reschedule plans on my account, I do apologize for it. We'll try and do a better job in communicating in the future. We'll continue with our discussion of the Srimad Bhagavatam as Bhakti Vaibhav. We'll start with the Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udiraya Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naishtaki. Okay, so so the last time when we had a discussion, there was one of the points that had come up for the discussion was the interplay between Gyan and Vigyan. And then I thought that I will start off by speaking a little bit on that topic, see if we can have some discussion on it. And then after that, we will resume our discussion on the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.6.11. We'll start from. So so the discussion in Gyan and Vigyan, it came based on a verse in Narad Muni's sharing with Srila Vyasadeva, where he talked about how both these things became, both Gyan and Vigyan became prevalent. And some of the questions that were discussed was what is one, how is it different from the other, what is the relationship between the two. So then I thought that I'll take some time and try and approach the topic a little bit more systematically. So before to preface the discussion, I just wanted to share something that is said in the scriptures, that we do not see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And this, to a great extent, is also one of the reasons why we see similar concepts, similar terms interpreted a little differently. The Vedas, of course, they are free from any defects, but because they're addressing people who see the world based on how they are, the Vedas also adjust accordingly. So we'll see the same thing happen when we do a little deeper discussion on Gyan and Vigyan. So just wanted to set the context for that. So Gyan is loosely translated as theoretical knowledge, and Vigyan is translated as practical or realized knowledge. And we will see Srila Prabhupada over and over use this use similar terminology to distinguish between Gyan and Vairagya. That Gyan is theoretical knowledge, Vairagya and Vigyan is practical knowledge. So Prabhupada, when he was giving a lecture in Los Angeles, this is early days in 1969. So a young woman, she heard Prabhupada talking about Krishna, So, and she asked him that, how do you know Krishna? How do you get to know Krishna? By talking about him? And then Prabhupada answers, no, these people are not talking. And he's referring to his disciples now. He's saying these people are not talking. They are realized. Talking is the beginning, but there is realization. Just like when I did not come to your country, I was talking that America is like this, America is like that. But now when I have come to America, I realize what America is. So talking is theoretical understanding, and when you realize that, is practical understanding. One is called Gyan, other is called Vigyan. So Gyan and Vigyan, both things are there, theoretical and practical. Theoretical knowledge is Gyan and practical knowledge is Vigyan. So this is Srila Prabhupada explaining in the simplistic terms to somebody who was pretty much off the street. And even though he will refine, or the scriptures, through the scriptures he will refine the definitions, but the overarching definition remains the same. That Gyan is theoretical, Vigyan is practical or realized. Once Prabhupada was walking in the morning walk in Bombay, and a guest asked him pretty much the same question, more explicitly, what is the distinction between Gyan and Vigyan? And then Prabhupada said, Gyan means theoretical knowledge and Vigyan means practical knowledge. And then he illustrates. He says, simply to know God is great, that is not sufficient. So the guest says, no, that is theoretical. And Prabhupada said, yes, that is theoretical. You must know how great he is. That we have to learn from the Shastras, from the Guru, how great he is. So this is Gyan. Just like the Brahma Samhita, Vedic, Yato va imani bhutani jayante. He is the source of all material worlds. In him everything stays. And after annihilation, everything goes into him. This is one understanding. Nitya nityanams chetanas chetanams. So Prabhupada, and if you look at Prabhupada's purports, you will see that he more or less stays true to this concept of Gyan being theoretical and Vigyan being practical. But there are some places where the Shastras themselves and Prabhupada in the interpretation of the Shastras has slightly different meaning, which do not violate the basic understanding, but maybe refine this a little bit more. So at one point, Prabhupada says that Gyan is general knowledge and Vigyan is specific knowledge. And in the purport of Bhagavad Gita 341, Prabhupada makes this point. Gyan refers to knowledge of the self as distinguished from non-self. Or in other words, knowledge that spirit soul is not the body. Gyan refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul's constitutional position and his relationship to the Supreme Soul. And then he quotes the Bhagavatam verse, Jnanam param guhyam me yaj jnanam samanvitam saharasyam tadangam cha grahana gaditam maya. The knowledge of the self and the Supreme Self is very confidential and mysterious. But such knowledge and specific realization can be understood if explained with the various aspects by the Lord himself. And then he goes on in the purport to say, Bhagavad Gita gives us that general and specific knowledge of the self. The living entities are part and parcel of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. So the specificity, the actionability of the items of the Gyan. So, and we'll see at other places also where this distinction is made. That Gyan is general and Vigyan is specific. And like I said, it does not violate the original definition of theoretical and applied, but theoretical knowledge it's like if you read something and you get a general understanding of what it is. But when you actually sit down to do it, then you need very specific knowledge. That now I need to do this thing needs to be tightened 1 millimeter, and this thing needs to be loosened. So a lot of specificity is essential when you're doing, when you're actually implementing the knowledge. So that is why at Gyan is called general and Vigyan is called specific knowledge. Um, some other distinctions between Gyan and Vigyan, which again they come forth in this particular verse also. That Gyan in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada will, when Gyan is used, he will typically refer to it as the preliminary spiritual understanding by which one can distinguish between matter and spirit. So this is, in a way, it's a fairly basic understanding that it is the beginning of one's spiritual life, that one begins to acknowledge the presence of a spirit soul and is able to distinguish between matter and spirit. And that is Gyan. That is Bhagavad Gita 342. Vigyan is one by which, in addition to understanding the nature of the matter and spirit, also understands the nature of Krishna and the relationship between the two. So Vigyan includes what is conventionally considered to be Sambandhya, the nature of the soul, the nature of Krishna, and the nature of the relationship between the two. So Gyan refers to a general understanding of the spirit differing from water, and Vigyan refers to practically understanding the position of the soul as the eternal servitor of Krishna. Clearly understanding this position, a person can act upon it. Now, in the later parts of the Bhagavad Gita and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the definition changes a little bit. And Prabhupada calls, in the later chapters of Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says Gyan is complete knowledge. And he defines complete knowledge as understanding yourself, Krishna, and the nature of the relationship, which is essentially Sambandhya. And then he calls Vigyan as Abhidegyan, which is acting based on the knowledge that one has gained in Sambandhya. So he places Gyan as on the Brahmabhuta platform and Vigyan on the Bhakti platform. So natural question comes is that there's contradictions in the Vedas. Do they weaken the tattvas? And they don't. So that's why we had the preface earlier on that in the third chapter or the fourth chapter, fourth chapter he does speak a little bit about himself, but in the third chapter he has not spoken about himself. So it's too early for Krishna to define Gyan as including him. So the Gyan at that point for Arjun is the understanding that he is not the body, but the soul. And later on, when beginning from the 7th chapter, actually Krishna talks extensively about himself. Then when he speaks about Gyan, he expands the definition of Gyan to include himself and the nature of the relationship also. Just to make matters a little bit more confusing, if you are not confused enough already, there are times when Gyan refers to Vigyan. And this is just this is just the poetic liberty that the speaker takes. That in many verses in the Bhagavatam, when Gyan is spoken, it actually refers to Vigyan, and one can deduce it from the context. in chapter 4 also, many times you will see when Krishna uses the word Gyan, the context clearly indicates that he's talking about uh, Vigyan. So how do we approach it? We approach it from the sense that we understand the nature of these two terms, the relationship with each other, and then apply it in the context to understand what it means. Um, so I wanted to expand a little bit more on the definition of Gyan and Vigyan, but I'll take a pause over here. And it's a little bit dense, so um, uh, I don't want to take too much of the time from our study of the Bhagavatam, but I think it's relevant. So I'll pause here and see if we have any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I have one question on the previous from 2 weeks ago actually from your class. You referred to Bhagavad Gita 7.1, where you mentioned, I'm not sure whether it is 7.1 or 7.2, but you mentioned that Jnana is material and Vijnana is spiritual. So in that context, like how will material lead to spiritual if Jnana is material?
Right. So actually, this is something that I will speak on. So this is a verse where Prabhupada translates Gyan Vigyan as phenomenal and numinous. And phenomenal he translates numinous as. Hold the question with you. I will actually speak about it when I just go ahead and speak on the definition of Gyan.
Sure.
Okay. So what is Gyan? So Arjun, of course, asked this question on our behalf in the 13th chapter. So he asks a series of questions, and then he says that what is Jnanam and Gayam? What is knowledge and what is the object of knowledge? What is Kshetram and Kshetra Jnanam? What is the field of activities and who is the knower of the field of activities? And Krishna's response is that to understand the body and the knower of the body is knowledge. So he defines Gyan as understanding the body and the knower of the body. And then he says Matam Mama, that is my opinion. So whenever Krishna says my opinion, that means don't argue with Krishna. So he is giving this concise and precise definition of Gyan, that it is that Gyan is knowing the Kshetra and the Kshetragyam. So Kshetra is matter. It is the field of activities. Kshetragyam is the knower. Specifically, Kshetra is body, and body is gross. It's made up of those 23 elements. So, and the Kshetragyam is two Kshetragyams. One is the soul that knows the body, and one is, of course, Krishna, who knows all the Kshetras. So essentially what Krishna is defining Gyan is knowing the body and the knower of the body. So in the conclusion of that chapter, in 1335, Krishna says, those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body. So knowledge is defined as understanding body and the knower of the body. So the components being matter, spirit, and in spirit understanding the soul and the super soul. So in the purport of 1335, Prabhupada says, perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the super soul is known in terms of Vedic literatures as Gyan. That is the opinion of Krishna. So in 7.2, so this is Achuta's question. So Prabhupada extends the scope of Gyan to the material world also. And it's not that he's extending it. Krishna has already included it, because when he says Kshetra, then the Kshetra includes the material world. So in the purport to 7.2, Prabhupada says, complete knowledge includes knowledge of the phenomenal world, the spirit behind it, and the source of both of them. And this is transcendental knowledge. So no difference between 7.2 and 13.35. The same point is being made in both the places. The only difference is that the knowledge that is exclusively focused on Kshetra without attention to the Kshetragya is not Gyan. So Gyan includes Kshetra and Kshetragya, and that is the spiritual definition. That is the Vedic definition of Gyan. So if we look at the Sankhya philosophy, the Sankhya philosophy begins with the analysis of the 24 elements. And out of the 24 elements, 23 elements are phenomenal. The five panchabhutas and the senses and the object of the senses, they are all phenomenal there. So so when we say that Gyan is, so when Prabhupada says in 7.2 that Gyan is phenomenal, then he's talking about the phenomenal world as it is related to the spiritual world. The relationship of Gyan is based on how does matter relate with spirit. Otherwise, Prabhupada in a purport, he says that, this is in the purport of 320, in the Bhagavatam, 324:17, he says, Gyan does not refer to ordinary research work. Gyan entails receiving knowledge from the scriptures through the spiritual master by disciplic succession. Okay, does that help you, Achyuta?
I'm kind of confused a little bit
Sure, go ahead.
on that, in the sense that so if knowledge is not so when Prabhupada says so you said that Prabhupada is basically saying Jnana is phenomenal in terms of relationship with the spiritual world. Is it right? Is that the right? Is that what he said?
So it's
is
a
that
little.
Why he mentioned? Is that why he mentioned like Jnana is phenomenal, like in 7.2 and 13.5?
No, in 7.2 he says it's phenomenal. So so phenomenal is so phenomenal is something. So how do we define phenomenal? So you know what phenomena is, right? Phenomena means that an occurrence. So phenomenal is something that is known through the senses and refers to knowledge that is acquired through the senses. And that is the nature of Gyan. Because Gyan is theoretical. I mean, the senses in this case includes the mind also. So that is why the nature of acquiring that knowledge is phenomenal. Numinous means spiritual, which means that after putting this knowledge that you have acquired phenomenally into practice, what are the realizations that you get?
It's experiential.
So that is experiential, right? Does that help?
Mm. Is there more, Prabhu, to this section? Or
So yeah, so maybe it's a good idea. Maybe try and make a note of your doubts, and then if they're not addressed by the end of the discussion, then you can bring it up at the time. Okay.
yeah, Prabhu.
Okay. So we discussed a little bit uh, about what is Gyan, right? So Gyan is understanding the distinction between matter and spirit, and Gyan is understanding the Kshetra and the Kshetragya, matters and the knower of matter, the soul, and Krishna. Gyan is Sambandh Gyan. So these are the different understandings. So how is Gyan acquired? And an analogy that is used is that a blind person can never fully understand the nature of an element. So how can he explain it to others? And I think, and maybe that is the situation that I am in right now. So unless the person is self-realized, he cannot help others make spiritual advancement. So, so the point is that even though Gyan is theoretical knowledge, it can only be acquired from a person who has Vigyan, who has practical knowledge, or who has realized that knowledge. So again, the analogy goes that a person has read about an elephant but never seen an elephant, and then he goes to a classroom and then he tries to explain to a person what an elephant is. So uh, it is difficult to do. So therefore, Gyan is best acquired from a person who has realized it. And this point is made by the other conditions around obtaining Gyan are mentioned by Krishna in chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita. So he said, Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavano Yavan. So he said, Imam, from me, I spoke. So the source of Gyan is Krishna. So that is the one characteristic of Gyan. Second is Evam Parampara Praptam. It should come down from a bona fide disciplic succession. And the third is that you should receive it from a person who has realized that knowledge. So, one may say that the first and the second maybe, but third it's difficult to get. There are not many people who are self-realized souls. And we are in a fortunate situation where we have connection to Srila Prabhupada. So as long as the information is represented as by a transparent media, then even though the person may not be self-realized, if the person is not changing the information, then it is as good as getting it from the self-realized soul. So in the so in 13.8 to 12, Krishna gives the list of 20 qualities. When he talks about Gyan, he gives a list of 20 qualities and he says that these are knowledge, everything else is, I declare as ignorance. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, the process of knowledge is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent men as being the interaction of the field of activity. So this is the phenomenal part. But actually, this is a real process of knowledge. If one accepts this knowledge, then possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. This is not the interaction of the 24 elements as described before. This is actually the means to get out of the entanglement of these elements. So that is why the phenomenal also becomes relevant. So we don't study matter to understand matter, but we study matter to get out of matter. And And then there are more, so there are more practical aspects of acquiring Gyan. How does one acquire Gyan? So Krishna gives us 28 qualities of humility, pridelessness, uh, being equipoised. So these are qualities by which one can obtain knowledge. These are qualities by which one can disseminate knowledge. So in the Bhagavatam in Uddhav Gita, Uddhav asks a similar question and Krishna gives him a similar answer, only this time he gives 28 qualities. But if you do a comparison between those qualities, you'll see that they don't match one on one, but there is a lot of qualitative overlap. Now, so we may say that um, uh, where do we stand? Because we are studying the Bhagavatam, we did study the Bhagavad Gita. We are not really focusing on developing all those 20 qualities or 28 qualities. So the method that is given in the Bhagavad Gita and to some extent Uddhav Gita, that is a Varnashram method, in which one becomes gradually a Brahmana, develops the qualities of the Brahmanas, and gets elevated to the mode of goodness, and the mode of goodness is conducive to acquiring knowledge. We try and respect that path, but we don't really follow that path. We follow the path that Krishna has given in chapter 4, verse 34. Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya ubdakshanti te jnanam jnaninastas jnaninas tattva darshana. That we try to approach try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquiring from him submissively and rendering service to him. And then he says the self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So here Krishna is making the point we made earlier on, that in order to get Gyan, you have to approach one who has Vigyan. So that is the way, because they have seen the truth, they can impart it to you. And the other aspects of inquiring submissively, rendering service to him, is to invoke the mercy. So that is the main component by which we get both Gyan and Vigyan. So the inquiring part is the knowledge part, that you ask a question, you get an answer. That is the knowledge part. But the mood of summation, and most importantly, the mood of service, that is the mercy part. So we and through the Guru, we get the mercy of Krishna. So ultimately, the knowledge that we're getting is we are getting it by the mercy of Krishna. But it's also important for us to understand that Gyan will not take us to perfection. The Gyan in itself is incomplete. If self-realization was Gyan, then there are people who are intellectually very, very advanced, and there were people in the past also whose mental acumen was very, very high, but did not take them to perfection. Because with Gyan, the nature of Gyan is that it allows for a lot of subjectivity in it. So example is, and I don't know if in this group we have scientists and engineers, but the difference is between scientists and engineers. Scientists, they deal with Gyan. So they will come up with theories. If the theory is wrong, they'll shrug their shoulders and say, okay, on to my next theory. Even in the theory, they will have subjectivity. For an engineer, if he's building a bridge, there's no question of subjectivity. Everything has to be exact. They can't say that, we'll build this and it may be 1 millimeter, it may be 5 millimeters. So I was hearing a lecture by Krishna Swaran Prabhu, and he was talking about the subject of Jnana-Vigyan, and he was relating. He's used to be a professor in IIT Delhi, and he was saying sometimes I used to give problems, and students would give me answers like the diameter of the pipeline is 1 kilometer, and then I would call them and I would say that how can the diameter of a pipeline be 1 kilometer? And they would say, why not? And then he would say, then he would realize that they had never actually seen a pipeline. So they would come up with some way of solving a problem which was incorrect, but they did not have that understanding that this is what a pipeline is. Its diameter is in millimeters or centimeters, cannot be a kilometer. So he says that is the uh, uh, the the realizations of Vigyan that help the teacher impart the proper knowledge to the student. So not only is Gyan incomplete without Vigyan, Gyan is actually useless without Vigyan. That if somebody acquires knowledge and does not act upon it, then it is actually harmful. So Srila Prabhupada in a lecture, and this is in his pretty much in his first year in 1966, second year actually. He's commenting on the verse of Bhagavad Gita 6.4, and so 6.4 has this term Jnana-Vigyan Triptatma. And Prabhupada actually is very fond of this term. He uses that very often, Jnana-Vigyan Triptatma. So he's commenting on it and he says one should not only have theoretical knowledge but practical knowledge. Simply understanding that I'm not this body, I'm not body, then I'm doing all nonsense of this body. I am discussing, there are so many societies. They're very seriously discussing Vedanta philosophy and smoking with wine glass and very enjoying life. You see? So that sort of gyan, that sort of knowledge is not necessary, you see. So Jnana-Vigyan. One should have knowledge perfectly and it must be demonstrated in practical field. Yes, but that means one who has actually felt himself that I am not this body. Then naturally, his bodily necessities will be reduced to the minimum. That is practical. If I am to increase the demands of my body and I'm theoretically thinking I am not this body, oh, that is not required. Jnana-Vigyan Triptatma. And there are other quotes also that Prabhupada talks about this. So, but the essential takeaway over here is, what is Gyan? That Gyan is theoretical knowledge. It is for practical purpose, we can consider it to be Sambandh Gyan, knowledge of distinction between matter and soul, and relationship between the soul and Krishna, and also the fact that Gyan in itself is a means to an end and not an end in itself. So then I wanted to discuss a little bit about Vigyan, but I'll stop over here and see if there's any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Sarang Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhupada very often take this example of, let's say, somebody want to taste, we know honey is sweet. Until the time we open the bottle, we put our hand in it and lick our finger, taste it. But we know it's sweet, but it's a different sweetness. It's not like sweet like sugar, but it has a specific sweetness. This is an example that Prabhupada take very often.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. That's a good example. That you may study about the sweetness of honey, but unless you taste it, you will not actually experience it, and much less be able to explain it to others. Thank you, Prabhu. Achyuta, you had a question, I think?
Yes, Prabhuji. So you mentioned like two ways of getting jnana. One is approaching one who has realized it and inquiring submissively, and the other one was, other one was to invoke the mercy basically by rendering service. So what is what are we doing? Like, I mean, right now, like, I mean, we're studying Srimad Bhagavatam. Studying scriptures. What is this not jnana, or is this what is?
It is. So it is more in the category of Bhagavad Katha. So when you look at Gyan, then Gyan is a little, it's a little different. It's more analytical. If you were actually following the process of Gyan, then our focus on, so like I'll give you an example. When you read the Bhagavad Gita, what do you focus more on? The verses or the purport?
The purport, of course.
Right. So if you were following the process of Gyan, we would focus more on the verses. We would look at the Sanskrit, at the translation, and how they correlate with one another, and that would be the process of the gradual elevation. But Prabhupada once, when he was translating his Bhagavad Gita, and his editors had asked him, this has become a bit of a controversial subject now, but since it's controversial, I won't speak about it. But purport is something that is Prabhupada's realizations that he has given to us. If you look at the purport, it's almost like Krishna Katha. The Bhagavatam is, by nature, is, even though the Gita is in a Purana, it's called an Upanishad, the Bhagavatam is a Purana in itself, and its focus is Krishna Katha. Now there is an element of Gyan, of course, that it comes by, and it's actually a segue into Vigyan. That when we do Krishna Katha, then we actually bypass the process of the process of Gyan to Vigyan. Then we follow the process of Vigyan to Gyan, and that is more by mercy. So I'll talk a little bit about this later on, but I think a short answer to your question is that while there are components of Gyan, the focus of what we do is primarily Krishna Katha.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so Vigyan. So in instructions of Maharaj Prithu, this is in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, he talks about Vigyan Vishesh. And Prabhupada, in the purport to that verse, he says that in this verse, the word Vigyan is specifically important. Gyan is the knowledge of spiritual identity that one attains when one does not consider himself to be the body, is explained in Bhagavad Gita as the Brahmabhuta. The revival of spiritual realization. The understanding of the distinction between material existence and spiritual existence is called Gyan. After coming to the platform of Gyan or the Brahmabhuta stage, one ultimately comes to devotional service, in which he completely understands his own position and the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This understanding is explained here as Vigyan Vishesh. The Lord says, therefore, that the knowledge of him is Vigyan, science. In other words, when one is strengthened by scientific knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his position of liberation is guaranteed. In Bhagavad Gita 9.2, the science of devotional service is described as Pratyakshvagam Dharmayam, direct understanding of the principles of religion by realization. So, based on the definition used by Maharaj Prithu, Srila Prabhupada, he is defining Vigyan over here as the one in devotional service is able, through the process of devotional service, is able to completely understand your own position and the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is Sambandhan Abhiday. Again, so again, this is consistent with knowledge and implement and realization of it. again, Uddhav Gita. So Uddhav Gita, we see a lot of parallel between Bhagavad Gita and Uddhav Gita. The only thing that Uddhav Gita is more, the component of bhakti is more, and details are higher. So Krishna tells, so this is Prabhupada's commentary on 11-19-15. A self-realized soul in the stage of Vigyan is not at all attracted by objects that are created, maintained, and ultimately destroyed. The stage of Gyan is the preliminary stage of knowledge for those still identifying themselves in terms of the material universe, whereas Vigyan is the mature state of knowledge for those who see themselves as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So same concept, presented a little differently. Now, how does one acquire Vigyan? So we had studied that in order to acquire Gyan, we approach a soul that is self-realized. So what about Vigyan? So just like in Gyan, there are, there is the Varnashram way in which one studies the scriptures, becomes elevated to the mode of goodness, develops the qualities, the 20 or the 28 qualities, and amongst those qualities is Gyan and Vigyan. So through systematic purification, and that process is explained in chapter 4, and this is in verses 16 to 24, and it is summarized in the famous verse that I forget the verse number, but the verse in which Krishna says that one who sees action in inaction and inaction in action understands it. So that is the process of the conversion of Gyan to Vigyan. And it's a pretty elaborate discussion. I don't think we have the time for it, or you may probably be aware of it. But if you have time, if you read that verse in the purport, then Krishna is explaining to Arjun that, so inaction is Gyan and action is karma. So one who sees inaction in action means one who sees Gyan in karma. And one who sees action in inaction is one who sees karma in Gyan. So the process is that one learns something, then one acts based on that knowledge. Based on that knowledge, one gets realization, and based on the realization, one acts again. Then one gets more realization, one gets more understanding, and then one acts again. So that's how there is this cycle essentially between karma, from karma to Gyan, from Gyan to akarma, from akarma to Vigyan, and then the cycle continues. So we don't follow that process. We follow the Bhagavad Gita, and the Bhagavad Gita is explained in the Bhagavad Gita of Vigyan is explained in the Bhagavatam, and we covered it in the second. This is in the first canto, second chapter, from verses 16 to 22. Kind of interesting that in Bhagavad Gita it's 4:16 to 24, and in Bhagavatam it's 1:16 to 22. But these are the famous Shanvatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtan. Those are the famous set of verses where Sutta Goswami explains that how by giving service to the sages one gets knowledge. And the concluding verse 1-20 is that thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by the contact with devotional service gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. So positive scientific knowledge is the Vigyan that comes as the result of. So you see, there is no prerequisite of Gyan in this case. If you look at the progression over there, the progression begins with eagerness to hear Krishna Katha, and the progression begins with serving those who are liberated by serving the devotees, and then Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu, and then everything that that is contaminating gets removed from the hearts, and finally one gets positive scientific understanding. So generally speaking, Vigyan and Gyan go together. So even though we have said in the previous discussion that Vigyan is independent of Gyan, because, or to modify that, it is independent of the need to have Gyan as a prerequisite. But when it reaches the stage of Vigyan, then Gyan begins to appear on itself. So Prabhupada on this, he speaks a little bit the need for Gyan and Vigyan to go together. He speaks on this. There's a lecture that he gave in Los Angeles where he says any religion without scientific understanding of the philosophy is simply sentiment. It is not religion. Any philosophy without religious understanding is mental speculation. That is also useless. Philosophy which does not search ultimately what is truth, what is God, that philosophy is mental speculation. And the knowledge of God without philosophy is simply sentiment. They should be combined. To understand God, our relationship with God, our duty, everything should be understood scientifically. Bhagavad Tattva Vigyanam. Therefore, this word has been used, Vishesha Jnanam, Vigyanam. Ordinary knowledge, we. When this word is added, we means Visheshashta, means particularly for practical application. That is Vigyanam. Jnanam is full knowledge, Vigyanam is applying the knowledge in practical life. Prabhupada also, because the whole process of Gyan and Vigyan is subtle, Prabhupada will also, you'll see, he talks more about the symptoms of Gyan, Vigyan. And one of the verses that he quotes very often is the Bhagavad Gita 6:8, Gyan Vigyan Triptatma, Puthusto Vijayendriya. That a person is said to be established when he is fully satisfied by virtue of knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is controlled. He sees everything, whether it is pebble, stone, or gold, as the same. So that is the symptom of one who is situated in Gyan and Vigyan. So what do we see the symptoms? We see Triptatma, that is fully satisfied, and Vijayatindriya, that he has control on the senses. So that is proof of Gyan and Vigyan. So in the current age, most of the people do not even have the basic Gyan. So they don't even realize that they are not the body. In fact, they live in the opposite conception. They live in the conception there is nothing but the body. But in the Vedic times, people may not have big Gyan, but they had Gyan. Even the Shudras had Gyan. So they knew that they were not the body. They may not have realized it, but they had that Gyan. They knew that they were not the body. They may be attached to the body, they may be lamenting because of bodily tribulations, but at least they had this theoretical knowledge. And because they had this theoretical knowledge, they were completely submissive to, they recognized the glory of those who had that practical knowledge. So they were submissive to the Brahmanas or to the higher Varnas because they had more practical knowledge than they themselves. So we see the same thing in the discussion between Maharaj Rahugana and Jad Bharat. So Maharaj Rahugana was a Vedic king. He had complete knowledge. And when he had the initial conversation with Jad Bharat, he could immediately see that this is a realized person. And then he started inquiring from him. So Prabhupada is making this point So he is diminishing the importance of Gyan, but he is not diminishing the importance of Gyan. So he is saying that Gyan is important because with Gyan we can understand the symptoms of one who is practicing, who has realized that Gyan. So it's not an end in itself. So a practical takeaway is that, and actually I've taken a lot more time, I'm sorry. But the practical takeaway is that ultimately we are trying to understand Krishna. and Krishna is difficult to understand. And Krishna openly says that he cannot be reached by Gyan. Then Brahma Samhita says, Vetam Ajuttam Atadim Anantarupam Adim Purana Purusham Navayovanam Vedesha Durlabham. That he says that he's not attainable by the Vedas and not by the yogis. Pantastu Kotiyata Vatsara Sampragamyo. And then he says, Premanjana Churuti Bhakti Vilochanena. But he says, but those who are his devotees, they can attain him. So that's the process for us. Bhakti. Bhakti means becoming dear to Krishna and his representatives. And how to become dear to Krishna and his representative? Krishna. So in the 12th chapter, in 8 verses from 13 to 20, if you see those verses, what do they end with? Does anybody know? What do these verses end with? Chapter 12, verses 13 to 20, they all end with the same phrase. And the phrase that Krishna says, such a person is very dear to me. He says that over and over again. So he elaborates the qualities of the people that are dear to him. And these are the qualities that we try and cultivate to become dear to Krishna and his devotees. But ultimately, we are relying on the mercy of Krishna, because Krishna himself is assuring us. So if you look at the Chaturshloki Bhagavad Gita, then Krishna says that to those who are devoted to me, I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. That to show them special mercy, I destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born out of ignorance. So he gives them both Gyan and Vigyan. So Gyan, while it is important, it is not an essential prerequisite to Vigyan. Vigyan is more important. Vigyan we can get by submitting to a self-realized person. Vigyan we can get by Tadvidi Pranipatena, Pariprashnena, Sevaya. And Vigyan may or may not result in Gyan. That is completely up to Krishna. We have the example of Dhruva Maharaj. He did not have any Gyan, but he reached the stage of Vigyan just because he followed the instruction of his spiritual master. But that's why he could not glorify Krishna, because he did not know. But when Krishna, he touched him with his conch shell, then all the knowledge appeared. So Vigyan came first, and then Gyan came. The gopis, even though they were offered knowledge, they rejected it. When Uddhav came and he started offering them knowledge about Krishna's greatness, they said, not interested. They had Vigyan. They had the realization about the fact that their position is to serve Krishna. So, so this is what I had. I think there was one question, I don't know if it was Gaur Sundar or Achyuta, who had asked that is Gyan Vigyan lost when you give up the body? And I don't really have a clear answer to that, but I do have some anecdotes that if you look at the pastimes of Vritasur or Gajendra or Jat Bharat, their bodies changed. And in all these cases, they changed drastically. Vritasur became a demon, Gajendra became an elephant, and Jat Bharat, he first became a deer and then a retarded person. But they retained their Gyan and Vigyan. Vigyan is devotional service. Bhakti never gets lost. It may get covered, but it never gets lost. So my understanding is that it will stay with you. Your realizations will stay with you life after life. Maybe you'll have to memorize the shlokas again, or maybe when you memorize them the second time, they'll come back to you much quicker. Bhakti Siddhant was able to memorize the Bhagavad Gita when he was, I believe, only 5 years old. So he was obviously continuing from his previous life. So I'll stop here. See if there is any further questions or comments.
So Praji, if somebody has Vijnana, what are the how does one know that somebody has realized knowledge, um, or what are the symptoms of somebody who has Vijnana?
That's a good question, and I believe I spoke about it. Uh, okay, I didn't speak about it. So actually, in the purport of 11.242, Prabhupada gives the symptoms of Vigyan, and he gives three symptoms: Tushti, Pushti, and Virakti. And this is the verse that compares to one eating. So pleasure, satisfaction, and detachment. So when a person is able, when you see a person taking pleasure in devotional service, when a person is not hankering for anything and fully self-satisfied with whatever he has, we can understand that the person is advancing on the path of Vigyan. So uh, so essentially, because Vigyan is experiential practice, from the experiential platform, a a person will symptomatically display where he is situated. And Prabhupada was saying that just on Gyan, people may keep talking that I'm not the body, but they'll be drinking wine and having all kinds of nonsense discussion. But when a person is on the platform of big Gyan, he will act as per the knowledge that he has acquired. So if he has realized that he is not the body, then he will automatically be detached from the body. If he realizes that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he will serve Krishna and he will derive pushti. He will derive pleasure from Krishna. And then realizing that that is all that he needs and nothing more, he gets pushti or satisfaction. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu. So Prabhuji, I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about this process of acquiring jnana. Like, is it can we tie it to the Damodar Leela pastime where prayas and kripa? So we need so basically what we're doing, like understanding, like reading scriptures, trying to understand trying to understand uh, our relationship with the Lord, or trying to understand how the Lord is, his pastimes a little bit, like how he's Tribhangalalitam, and his form is like this. I mean, of course, I mean, I have not realized it, but when the Lord sees, or when devotees see that we are trying to understand him or understand our relationship with him, then they will be merciful and pass the gyan, give us the vigyan, basically, because that's how you mentioned, right? Like, just by service and by mercy you get vigyan, that is, and even gyan actually. So by prayas is how in a way that that would be how we get jnana, and also from there vigyan.
Vigyan, yes, and the prayers that yes, I think your summarization is correct, and the prayers that we do is based on the instructions of a spiritual master. So that's the glory of our prayas. That's what makes it glorious. That it's not just any prayas, right? It is the desire. It is the desire of Krishna that is coming through our disciplic succession, through our spiritual master, through the Vaishnava Sangha, and when we act upon that, then then the mercy comes, and then concomitant with that mercy is Vigyan, and concomitant with the Vigyan is Gyan. And I think the important thing to understand is that if this is a process, it's not an event, right? It's something that we do through our entire spiritual lives. It does not end at any point. There's no point where we can say that we are, even though we sometimes use the term that this person was fully self-realized, and it's a glorification for an advanced devotee. But everybody is going through the process. Everybody is working, and through that work, they are according to the desires of Krishna and his devotees, and through that they are getting mercy, and through that they are making advancements.
Also, I really like that point where you mentioned that even after getting Vigyan, one can get more Jnana. So it's not just this one-way street of like only after Jnana you get Vigyan. It could be that you get Vigyan first, like Dhruv Maharaj's example that you gave. That was that really helped clear a lot of things. Because I always used to wonder because in India you see a lot of devotees who don't know how to read or write, and they are practicing Krishna consciousness, and I used to wonder how will they sustain without understanding, without knowledge, basically without being able to read. But yeah, this kind of clears up that a little bit. And yeah,
And there's a pastime of the illiterate Brahman and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also, the one who could not read the Gita, and Mahaprabhu said that he perfectly realized the Gita.
Yeah. But this whole thing was very eye-opening, Prabhu. Thank you so much for doing this.
I'm glad it helped. It was, and I'm also thankful to all of you for wanting to have in-depth discussions. It gives me an opportunity also to think more deeply about the subjects, and always in discussions. Since we are speaking about Gyan and Vigyan, it always benefits to hear from others' realizations. So I am actually I took a lot more time than I had expected to, but I would like to maybe do a few verses